Now, China's President Hu Jintao is coming to Washington, D.C. on Wednesday, and the stakes couldn't be higher. And the Chinese president emphasized the need for cooperation with the United States in certain areas, but also called the American dollar-dominated currency system a, quote, product of the past. Well, for more investor and author of this book right here, A Bull in China, Jim Rogers is talking to us all the way from Singapore today. So quite a statement there from Mr. Hu Jintao. Hoping we have Jim now. You yourself, there you go. Hi, Jim. You yourself have said that the 21st century will be China's century. I want to get your take on Mr. Hu Jintao's comments, and also for you to elaborate on your own statements there.
Well, Dina, I don't see how anybody can object, and we certainly hope that China and the U.S. work together and grow together. We could all work together, and then we could have more prosperity in the U.S., more prosperity in China, and more prosperity for the world. So, yes, I very much hope that everybody can figure that out. Unfortunately, history shows that politicians, for their own reasons, try to stir up trouble. Let them stay home. We'd all be better off.
But again, what do you make of Mr. Hu Jintao's statement? A pretty drastic statement there, questioning the U.S. dollar as the global currency.
Well, Dina, he's not the first person to question the United States dollar. The Chinese have been worrying for several months. The Russians have been worrying. The Indians, look around the world. Everybody's been worrying about the U.S. dollar, and I hope you're worrying about the U.S. dollar. The U.S. is the largest debtor nation, not the largest debtor nation in the world, the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. And unless somebody in the U.S. figures out something to do about that, we're going to have more problems. And the Chinese should be worried. I'm worried. I'm an American citizen. I'm an American taxpayer. I'm worried too.
And Jim, you've also said before that if we have a trade war, something else to worry about, you said that that would be the end of the world economy. But if we consider the balance of power between the United States and China, and also the economic realities in both countries, at this point in time, does China have incentive to listen to the United States?
You know, throughout history, whenever you've had trade wars, it's led to serious economic problems. Nobody has ever won a trade war. Everybody loses trade wars. The trade wars were what caused the Great Depression in the 30s. Among other things. And if we have a trade war, then you're going to have international trade collapsing, you're going to have a lot more bankruptcies, and everybody's standard of living is going to decline. Again, you don't have to be very smart. You just have to go back and read a few things and look it up, and you'll see what happens when there are trade wars.
And you know, many experts have pointed out that China has grown more confident in recent years, especially during the financial crisis, by which it wasn't affected as much as other nations, as much as the United States, perhaps. So what are they doing that we're not?
Well, in China, they save and invest over 35% of their income. The way you build a successful economy is you build capital. I mean, Karl Marx knew that. You have to have capital in order to have a successful economy. The way to get a successful economy, he and I would disagree on how to do it, but you got to build capital, and the way you build capital is you save, you invest. The Chinese have been saving and investing over 35% of their income. In the United States, we've been saving and investing 2% of our income. We've been borrowing and consuming. They've been saving and investing.
You know, I do want to take it back to the fact that Mr. Hu Jintao is basically giving the sense that he wants to challenge the current financial order.
We are 5 days away from fundamentally transforming the United States of America.
The way Bush has done it over the last 8 years, added $4 trillion by his lonesome, that's irresponsible. It's unpatriotic. We cannot and will not sustain deficits like these without end. That's why today I'm pledging to cut the deficit we inherited by half by the end of my first term in office. That's why today I'm pledging to cut the deficit we inherited by half by the end of my first term in office. We are paying the price for these deficits right now. My administration will not rest until every American can find a job.
We will not rest until we are succeeding in generating the jobs that this economy needs.
I will not rest until businesses are investing again and businesses are hiring again.
I'm not going to rest in our efforts to help people who are looking to find a job. We will not rest until we build an economy that's ready for America's future.
I have spent most of my life as a Democrat. I recently have seen fit to follow another course. I believe that the issues confronting us cross party lines. Outside of its legitimate functions, government does nothing as well or as economically as the private sector of the economy. For 3 decades, we've sought to solve the problems of unemployment through government planning, and the more the plans fail, the more the planners plan. A government can't control the economy without controlling people. And they know when a government sets out to do that, it must use force and coercion to achieve its purpose. Somewhere a perversion has taken place. Our natural unalienable rights are now considered to be a dispensation of government. And freedom has never been so fragile, so close to slipping from our grasp as it is at this moment.
China is poised to overtake the US as the world's largest economy, way ahead of schedule. The IMF predicts that by the end of the year, China's GDP, adjusted to the country's relatively low cost of living, will be $17.6 trillion, topping the US. Essentially, that means even though a typical person in China earns less than their American counterpart, they can afford more with their money. Well, it took a major effort for China to achieve its economic success. Just 3 decades ago, the country was bursting with unskilled labour, and the average income in America was about 21 times higher. Now the nation's taking a global lead. Glyn Ford, who's a former member of the European Parliament, thinks that the US tends to belittle China's growth.
It's been clear that China's economy has been growing very rapidly now for nearly 25 years, but frankly, allowing for where it started as a third world country, it really is a shock to the West and the rest that China's, if you want, in sight of actually becoming the largest economy, overtaking the European Union and the United States. The US has tended to, if you want, be in denial about China's growth to a degree. It assumes that China's, if you want, not going to overtake it.
China is now the biggest contributor to global growth, and it's predicted to continue building up its output. The IMF says this trend is indefinite. Now, for more analysis, let's speak to New York-based economist Max Fradd-Wolf. Welcome to the program, Max. China's economy now tops America's, but only in that one main index, which is purchasing power parity. How significant is this?
So these are much more important symbolically than they are in terms of the macroeconomics. However, it is a watershed moment. Since the Second World War, the United States has always been the largest economy, either in absolute terms, which it will likely remain for several more years, or even in purchasing power parity terms, which it has another title that we held until probably sometime in the last few months. And that is if you adjust the Chinese GDP up meaningfully for the lower average prices in China, or adjust the U.S. GDP down for the higher average prices here, we would see that the contribution all in with that adjustment would make China larger than the U.S. But China's been a larger contributor to global growth, not overall, but growth, for quite some time, given its very high growth rates on average the last 30 years, and our much, much lower growth rates of the last 30 years, not to mention the last several years starting in the 2008 recession.
Yeah, and that contributor to global growth, the IMF predicts China to only get stronger with that. Does the U.S. have a chance to reverse this trend in that particular one, do you believe?
Probably not in terms of the purchasing power parity basis. The United States will continue to be the largest economy in absolute terms, probably for at least another 5 or 6 years, although that too will eventually end. It is also worth remembering that there are literally 1 billion more people in China than the U.S., so it's only the sort of off and not equal distribution of global growth and global GDP that allows a country with 300 million people to be larger economically than a country with literally 1,300,000,000 people like China.
And does having the title of the world's leading purchasing power parity nation make China now a lot more attractive to investors?
That the destiny of China is to be the largest, most powerful economy in the world. Each of these milestones is symbolically important. It gives people excitement. It gives them something to work toward. It gives them a sense of achievement.
The market's been whipsawed all week trying to figure out just where the global economy is on worries about slowing growth in Europe, where some analysts now fear the possibility, Scott, of a double-dip recession.
And as we were watching the Dow bounce around, came the news today that China has surpassed the United States as the largest economy in the world.
Yeah, the trend line's been clear for a while, Scott, but the International Monetary Fund says that by one measure, China has now passed us, and the shift in economic power is visible right here on the streets of New York.
The Mark Waldorf Astoria Hotel on Park Avenue is where President Obama stays when visiting New York. In 1974, when China's future premier Deng Xiaoping first visited the U.S., he stayed at the Waldorf. Now, a firm led by Deng's grandson-in-law is buying the Waldorf. In the largest deal ever by a Chinese investor for an American building, Anbang Insurance will pay almost $2 billion to buy the hotel from Hilton. And the IMF says China's surging economic power will this year surpass the U.S., when China's GDP, adjusted for purchasing power, will hit $17.6 trillion to the U.S. economy's $17.4 trillion.
How fast is China growing at this point?
The Chinese economy is growing at the slowest it's grown in a generation, which is just over 7%.
Bill Adams of PNC Financial says that's still more than double the U.S.
In the U.S., we'd kill for 7% real GDP growth. But by Chinese standards, that's very, very slow. And wages are rising very quickly, so it's no longer a cheap labor supply in China. So a lot of the drivers of that old growth model have sort of been used up.
The U.S. had been the world's biggest economy since 1872, when we surpassed Britain. And in raw dollars, the U.S. remains number one. U.S. GDP is more than $17 trillion. China's is just over $10 trillion. But economists estimate China will surpass us by that measure, too, within a decade. Together, the U.S. and China account for fully 1/3 of the global economy.
Thanks, Anthony.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.